Now at this point our device is installed, our software is installed, we're logged in, we're actually ready to begin. The next step would be to go ahead and create a folder for a client. What we're going to go over to start with is just a basic acquisition protocol, so you can acquire data and then you could send it to an expert or a processing center to print a brain map for you. It'll create what's called an EDF file. What we're going to do that is we're simply going to go to folder selections, which is right below login. It's your next button down. As we click that, we see we get a whole nother window. First option, upper right hand corner, is create new folder. We click there. For today and for this exercise, I'm just going to use a real simple name. We recommend that anytime you're creating a client folder that you think about privacy. Make sure you use some kind of numbering system or coding system that you're used to in your facility. But for today, I'm just going to put a real simple bill test. Okay? You can use username for ID, or if you put the client's full name in for the file ID, you could put their client number or whatever your coding system is. I go ahead and hit OK. It just confirms that that's exactly what I want. I didn't make any typo type errors. I hit OK again. Now, to start with, we have a limited amount of settings files. This list will grow, and as you turn your Discovery into a trainer, we can also import all of the settings files from the Atlantis 3.4 or 3.5 software. But to start with, for this exercise, we're simply going to use the Discovery no limit session using pause and unpause. We highlight it, we hit OK. What this has done is it's taken our actual new folder and it's put those settings in there for me. Now, this is an interesting property of both Vista and Windows 7, that sometimes it doesn't update the screen for you. It's always good that after you create a folder that you hit the minimize button on our setup home screen. So you minimize the software, go down to your taskbar at the bottom. At the taskbar, then click it again. As you bring it up, you see then it refreshed the training ID, and we do see bill test. This is kind of like one of those erratic type bugs in Windows. Sometimes it goes right in, sometimes you have to refresh it. So think of it just simply as a screen refresh. At this point, we have our bill test, we have our Discovery test pause and unpause. Okay? Our next step is, well, let's go into some of the settings and see what might we need to change to prepare for this particular QEEG we're about to do. First, I go to View or Change Settings. We see our Setup Options screen. Okay. We're going to go up to Data Channels. Okay. Realize that the training channels up here at the top aren't relevant for this particular protocol because this is simply an assessment. However, in the Discovery software, which is different than, for instance, 3.4 or 3.5, is we have a new option called Discovery Acquisition Control. Okay, it's this button slightly down on the right hand side. As we click this, we're going to see it kind of like a grid on the channels that are going to be used. You notice that there's several channels that are depressed. If the buttons are pressed in, that means that is a channel that's going to be acquired. You notice that because the Discovery 24E has additional channels such as 24 versus the typical brain map being 19, we've added some extra sites that oftentimes people like to add, but we don't automatically select them. If you have a custom cap that has FPZ and OZ listed in that cap, you can go ahead and depress those and make those active channels. If not, you're using standard electro caps, for instance, you want to make sure those are not depressed so they're not going to be acquired. If you depress them and there's no electrode there, they're going to introduce a lot of noise, and you're going to see this noise on the screen and not realize that it's just simply an inactive channel trying to acquire but with no electrode. Okay, so this is all prepared for your standard brain map. We see our 19 sites and our ground, our two references, which will be linked ears, and we say perfect. Okay. Alrighty. There's some things on this screen I want you to keep in mind. If you've already looked at the 3.4 videos, you know that not a big fan of notch filters on as a default. It's always good to know what does my data look like prior to additional filtering. So I like to leave those off. What we'll see when we go to the training screen, since this is going to be just a random signal coming in, you're going to see that I can adjust the clarity of the signal with these notch filters live from the training screen. But you want to know that what you start with is adequate EEG. You don't want to train noise or train garbage, if you will. The other thing that we need to make sure we change on this particular screen is when we installed our hardware, if you remember, that COM port that Windows put the Discovery on was 3. So I'm going to go ahead here and just change that. Just makes it easier. Okay? What we're going to also do is we're going to go to Electrodes and Trainee Info. Okay? We want to verify that there's not an age in the client option here, because we don't want to trigger the training software and be trying to run z-scores. We want to simply do an acquisition this time. So we hit OK. We hit OK. The other thing we want to do is under session control. Okay. It's good to decide how long do you want the protocol to run. So if I go, let's go 60 seconds. Okay. And 2 runs. Okay. If we were using the other protocol that had segments in it, you could decide how long your eyes open, your eyes closed would be. The reason that this one is simply 1 and 0, if you remember, we did the actual unlimited pause and unpause with the space bar. So we'll show you that one here first. I'm simply going to hit OK. I'm then going to go ahead and change this for our purpose today. We do not have somebody hooked in at this moment with electrodes, so we're going to use simulation. You would of course be on training or assessment, so we hit OK. Down at the bottom right hand corner we hit use these settings. Now we're back to the setup home screen. Our next step is just to verify we're in the right folder, we have our right login, and we're going to simply go run the next session. Once we get to the training screen, I like to maximize this screen, especially when I'm going to do a 24 channel or a 19 channel acquisition. Here, I'm going to go up to the upper right hand or upper left hand corner, check data, verify we're on COM3, we are. I'm then going to hit go. You're going to then see an option to come up that says ready to start. Place our EEG cap, hit OK. Once we have that cap listed, we hit OK. It's then telling us a simulation is running. You're going to see that this is just a random noise signal. So this is going to give you good instruction on what those notch filters can do, even if you're training, garbage for the most part. At this point, we hit OK. We see our signals running across the screen here. Very noisy, not something we'd want to do a brain map on by any stretch. However, I'm going to go up to the upper left-hand corner to data. I'm then going to go ahead and turn on my 60 Hertz notch filter. Okay. And then I'm going to turn on the 50. You notice now that we have a signal that resembles EEG, but this was literally filtering a complete noise signal. So that's just a good indicator is that you want to make sure those filters are off when you start, because you don't want to be tricked into thinking you have good EEG when you really don't have any signal off the scalp.